Hello everyone, Ron here from L.T.L Tutoring Central, and this week I'm talking about how to use a semicolon. Last time I talked about the comma, but there are so many uses for the comma that I just attacked four major uses. The semicolon is not used as often, so this little video is going to help you for almost any occasion where you would want to use a semicolon, and it'll add to your knowledge of punctuation repertoire. Also in the video, you're going to see another use of the comma because sometimes commas are used in combination with semicolons, and I'll be explaining that shortly. So have fun with the video and keep learning. So your first question might be, what is a semicolon? What does a semicolon look like? Well, there it is in giant form. I've sort of expanded the semicolon. It looks like a period on top and a comma underneath, basically. So that is what a semicolon is and what a semicolon looks like. Use a semicolon when joining independent clauses with a conjunctive adverb or a transitional expression. Now, first of all, do you remember what an independent clause is? Well, basically, it's a complete sentence. So when you're joining two or more complete sentences together with a conjunctive adverb or transitional expression, you'll need a semicolon. And some examples of conjunctive adverbs are however, therefore, nevertheless, moreover, but there are many, many of them, far too many for me to list here. Transitional expression examples include in fact, for example, as a result, in other words, finally, still, for instance, but again, there are many, many transitional expressions, far too many to list here. But the main idea is to remember that if you're joining two or more independent clauses or two or more complete sentences together, and it's not a coordinating conjunction, which I'm going to talk about again later, but we talked about in the commas video, then you probably are going to need a semicolon. So let's look at a couple of examples with a conjunctive adverb or a transitional expression. The forecast predicted thunderstorms. Therefore, the picnic was canceled. So here we have a conjunctive adverb, and you can see the semicolon comes before and the comma comes after. So here's that use of the comma I was talking about. It's used with conjunctive adverbs when joining two or more independent clauses. And you can tell they're independent clauses or complete sentences because I could say the forecast predicted thunderstorms and just put a period there. That is a complete sentence. The other half, the picnic was canceled, is also a complete sentence. So we can see we have two independent clauses joined by a conjunctive adverb, therefore. The second example uses a transitional expression. Read more Canadian literature. For example, consider reading Margaret Atwood and Stephen Leacock. Now in this case, you have the semicolon before the transitional expression and the comma after. So the punctuation is the same for transitional expressions or conjunctive adverbs used in this way. And again, you have two complete sentences. Read more Canadian literature. We could just put a period there because I could be telling someone to do that. And again, consider reading Margaret Atwood and Stephen Leacock. I could be telling someone that as well. Now in these cases, they're implied subjects rather than written down subjects, but they are complete sentences joined by a transitional expression. You don't have to get too caught up in all the terminology. Just try to learn the rules and then practice, and remember them. The best way to learn is to write and to have your writing assessed if you want to get some feedback. And I highly recommend taking some courses from someone. You could take them from me, for example, and I'll talk to you more about that a little later. Another use of the semicolon is between items in a series when there is already internal punctuation. So for example, the attendees were Daniel Hawk, President, semicolon, Marie Auclair, Vice President, George Corll, Executive Financial Officer, and Talia Ray, Director. So we already have lots of commas in here between the names of the people and their jobs. So in order to have a bigger pause between each combination, we use a semicolon instead of another comma. We'd have loads of commas if we didn't use semicolons here. And when you're reading it, you would have a larger pause between Daniel Hawk, President, Marie Auclair, Vice President, George Correll, Executive Financial Officer. It's just natural to have a larger pause between these groupings. So a semicolon is very useful. The second example is similar. The cities in the survey include Vancouver, British Columbia, semicolon, Toronto, Ontario, Montreal, Quebec, and St. John's, Newfoundland. So here we have the names of cities and provinces as pairs, and then larger breaks in between each pair. And so we've used semicolons here. Now, one last thing about semicolons. I'm going to talk about the semicolon with coordinating conjunctions. And you remember in the commas video, we talked about coordinating conjunctions, and there's 7 of them: and, but, or, nor, for, so, and yet. So that we can list all of those here. And remember, the comma is usually used when joining 2 or more independent clauses with a coordinating conjunction. But a semicolon can be advisable when the independent clauses contain internal punctuation already. So it's a little bit like the last slide. When you already have other kinds of punctuation, particularly commas, within the sentence, you might want to use a semicolon in between the major components instead of a comma. So for example, the director was hardworking, comma, dedicated to his staff, comma, and confident. Now we use a semicolon, and he often seemed to be everywhere at once. Because in this case, you have your first complete sentence, or your first independent clause is the director was hardworking, dedicated to his staff, and confident. Could just put a period there. That's a complete sentence. But this independent clause has several commas already. And so we need a bigger pause between those and he often seemed to be everywhere at once, our second independent clause, which could also stand on its own. So if you're a little bit confused or you're not too sure about using commas with coordinating conjunctions, see the 4 uses of commas video. It'll give you some more information about that. But here's a case where you would use a semicolon between these 2 or more independent clauses if there's lots of internal punctuation. So there you have it, easy peasy, how to use a semicolon. Okay, maybe it's not all that easy, but with practice it becomes easier and easier. And as you learn more about other forms of punctuation and writing in general, including different kinds of phrases and clauses, this can be very, very helpful. So don't forget to like the video, subscribe to this channel if you're seeing it on YouTube. Make a comment, ask a question. You can even email me and ask a question. I try to get back to everyone as soon as possible. Take a course. There'll be some course listings with the video. Depending on where you see this video, it'll be underneath probably in most cases. The videos are also included in some of my courses as bonus material. So, basic writing course, paragraph writing course. You can take courses that are more personalized to you as well. If you visit the website, you'll see some listings there, and you can always ask me as well because I design courses specifically for people. In the meantime, keep learning, keep writing, and most important of all, keep having fun, because that's really how you learn and how you remember. If you learn under stress, you won't remember for very long. So keep having fun with the learning and keep in touch. Let me know what you think, and if you have any questions, ask away.